on the series ECG. Without further delay, I would like to call upon Dr. Muralidhar Sharma sir, Professor Emeritus, STMCA Udupi, to take over the session. Welcome to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think I am audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. In the previous session, we had discussed about certain abnormalities related to the QRS complex and the delta waves. One cause that is the pre-excitation syndromes. Now, another variety or another cause for the QRS complex changes is a premature ventricular complex. Premature ventricular complex is a premature beat occurring in the ventricles. It's an ectopic focus within the ventricles. If there is a ectopic focus within the ventricles, then it can produce the normal these QRS complexes. These also are named as ventricular ectopics, extrasystoles, premature beats. All these words, they mean the same. There is not much of a difference. Now, causes for this could be many. This kind of issue can occur quite frequently. It can occur as occasional or it can occur as a continuous one. Temporary causes like anxiety, sympathomimetic drugs like adrenaline, any of those drugs which will stimulate the sympathetic system, beta agonists, even excess of caffeine, hypokalemia, hypomagnesemia, digoxin toxicity, myocardial ischemia. These are the common causes which can produce a premature ventricular complexes. So, we will mainly focus on clinically important conditions like hypokalemia and hypomagnesemia, digoxin toxicity, and of course ischemia we will discuss at the end with a total different perspective. The other simple causes we can skip off as such. It can produce asymmetrical activation of the ventricles. Now, characteristically, in the features of premature ventricular complex, you will have a broader QRS complex. The QRS complex is more than 120 milliseconds. That means more than four segments of the minor segments or fine lines as such. So that's one of the important characteristics, as you see in this, in the different leads, ABL or V2, any of the leads as such, the QRS complex becomes widened as such. And it occurs before the next impulse occurs, next sinus impulse occurs, and hence there can be a PQRS incoordination or a PQ interval also could be altered. Now, what happens in this ECG is you can see the QRS complex over here, and then next P wave, the gap between the P wave and the R wave has become altered. It's not the same. And then, of course, the rhythm may be maintained. Usually, rhythm may be maintained. Even ST depression may occur, particularly in certain of the beats, may not be uniform. ST segment depression. Now, in this lead again, if you look at the ST segment in the second cycle and compare it to the first cycle, there is a difference. The ST segment is depressed by, now this blue line gives you the idea, by about 2 millimeters, whereas in the chest leads, the ST segment is slightly elevated about 3 millimeters. So there is a abnormal shift of the ST segment, but which is not constant. ST segment may have these variable changes in the ST segment elevation or depression, inversion or elevation can occur. And usually T waves would be quite prominent in these cases, in the premature ventricular complexes. So premature ventricular complexes can occur quite frequently. When they occur occasionally, there is no clinical significance. See, suppose when you record the ECG, once in a while, you may come across these premature ventricular complexes that doesn't have any clinical significance, which could be considered as temporary causes like anxiety and so on. Whereas when it is a constant one, then you will have to think of the causes for that. Now, some more of the examples of the premature complexes. Again, in this occasional premature complex, in the previous slide, what you have seen is a regular premature complex. Here, it's occasional one ventricular premature complex. This kind of feature is common in case of the anxiety-like conditions. Many a times it happens, like patients who are exposed to the ECG for the first time and they are having an apprehension about that. So in this case, it may not be considered as a significant. Whereas when the similar premature ventricular complexes occur constantly, regularly, and with a significant T wave elevation, they need to be considered as the other organic causes which need to be assessed. Now, organic causes which can produce premature beats, the most important, significant would be the ischemia and hypokalemia. We will discuss these separately in detail later. And it can be very severe and critical when the rhythm occurs or multiple ectopic beats are occur. When the premature ventricular systoles occur from multiple sinuses, it's when it occurs occasionally by a single sinus, you will have a one single wave. When it occurs in multiple sinuses, you will have atypical presentations, as you see in this ECG strip. The QRS complex, the shape is altered, even the interval is altered, and the rhythm is altered. There are certain very rapid QRS beats as charges as such, then the gap is increased. This kind of a situation can occur in very severe cases of ischemia. Now, this is in case of infarction. So we will discuss more about these other features when we discuss about the infarction later. But when we discuss about the premature beats have to be differentiated as either transient and occasional as well as a constant. Constant premature beats are always a cause for worry. Even a premature beats also can occur in a paroxysmal manner. Paroxysmal manner in the sense, at times there will be normal ECG, there will be no premature beats. Then all of a sudden the patient may have a feeling like he has palpitation. And during that phase, if you record the ECG, you may see the premature beats. These occur usually due to the environmental changes, electrolyte changes, hypokalemic conditions temporarily. These can produce a paroxysmal changes. So when you see the premature beats, it could be of any pattern, occasional one, or it could be like a constant, continuously constant one, or it could be the paroxysmal. Now in the paroxysmal again, it can be of different pattern. A paroxysmal where it's only for a short duration, 2 or 3 beats, or a constant like 10, 15 beats all of a sudden, and then the normal rhythm. So these variations can occur, a huge number of variations can occur. So that's about the premature beats which can produce a widening of the QRS complex. The next component which we discuss would be about the QT interval. And of course, a bit about the QRS complex also we'll continue combined with together. Now, QT interval is suggesting about the total time taken for the depolarization as well as repolarization event in the ventricles. See, PQ is for the atrium, QT is suggesting about the total ventricular activity, and to measure that QT interval, you need to identify the origin point of the Q and the end point of the T. These have to be noted, and this can vary depending on the shape of the ST segment as well as the T wave. So you should always consider the lowest point of the T wave and the lowest point of the Q point. So should not get mixed with this kind of wave pattern. So whenever there is a wave pattern changing in T wave, that should not be producing confusion. So QT interval has to be calculated in the same manner as we calculate any other cardiac event by counting the number of chambers over there. Now, QT interval always shortens when the heart rate is faster. It lengthens it when the heart rate is slower. It's quite obvious. Like now, to reduce this error, there is another method considering QT compensation or QTC calculation is done. Now that corrected QT or QT interval correction is you calculate corrected QT interval is the QT interval at a standard heart rate of 60 beats per minute, and it has to be calculated by a calculation of assessing the total QT interval of 60 beats per minute and then dividing it by 60 so that you will have the variables can be avoided. This allows comparison of QT values over time at different heart rates. So this is also another of the point. When a QT interval is abnormally prolonged, It may even result in a torticollis depointis. Torticollis depointis, I will come to that later. Occasionally, congenital QT syndromes also have been seen with risks of paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. Congenital QT syndromes, this is congenital short QT syndromes, where the patients may have otherwise normal, only that short QT time, the QT time is shorter, and these are more prone to develop fibrillation as such, fibrillation complications. Now, to calculate that QTC values and normal QTC values is QT is corrected. QTC is QT corrected QT time. If it is more than 440 milliseconds, that's a 10 finer lines, or in men, and 460 milliseconds in women is considered as a prolonged if it is more than that. If it is more than 500, it's always considered with the risk of torticollis depointis. Torticollis depointis, we will come to that next. QT is abnormally short if it is less than 350 milliseconds. So the normal range is 350 milliseconds to 440 milliseconds is the standard for the QTC interval or QT corrected asset. The useful rule is, if at all it's quite difficult to calculate all these issues, and if you have to read at a stretch, the simple issue is normal QT is less than half the preceding RR interval. So next RR interval you'll have to assess, and it should is less than half. That's the issue. In sense, now I think like how to assess that is the RR interval. It is assessed by this gap, and the QT interval is assessed by this gap, and it should be less than half. This is one of the other standard protocol usually used as a easy means of assessing the QT correction time. Ideally, you will have to go into the calculation, which is again tedious job. So usually, when we read the ECGs, we consider if the QT time is less than half of the preceding previous RR interval, then we consider this as a normal, and this is sufficient in majority of the cases. A few exceptions could be there where it needs some more assessment. Only when there is a significant arrhythmia, this needs to be corrected. Otherwise, in the patients who have a moderate rhythm pattern and not a very significant arrhythmia, this rule is good enough. Then the usual prolonged QTC interval causes are hypokalemia, hypomagnesemia, hypocalcemia, hypothermia, myocardial ischemia, patients who have a cardiac arrest and then they are now refibrillation is done or defibrillation is done, and patients with raised intracranial pressure, and of course congenitally long QT syndrome can occur. Certain of the drugs like anti-epileptic drugs, they also can produce a prolonged QT time, prolonged QT where it could be more than 440 milliseconds. We will not go into the examples of all this, but we will take up a few which are quite significant clinically. Among them, clinically significant is hypokalemia. So hypokalemia is a very frequently occurring condition in the clinical practice, particularly in the patients who are bedridden and where the nourishment of the patient is affected due to some or other reasons, or patients who are on parenteral fluid administration. The hypokalemia can occur quite frequently, and a hyperkalemia of less than 2.7 millimoles will be producing the ECG changes. ECG changes in hypokalemia. Hyperkalemia we have discussed previously in the last session. The hypokalemia, the changes which occur would be the characteristically, it will be again changing according to the severity of the hypokalemia. In the early stages, early changes of the hypokalemia would be the P waves become increased amplitude, they become more prominent, P waves become more prominent. PR interval becomes longer and longer, it becomes longer and longer as the potassium level gets reduced. The ST depression tends to occur, ST wave tends to get depressed, so instead of having a horizontal line, the ST wave tends to get depressed, and T wave either becomes flattened or it becomes inverted. That's the typical feature. And when it becomes more severe, then the ST segment takes a shape of U, and this is what we call as a U wave, and often better seen in chest leads than really the limb leads. In the chest leads, the UA pattern is seen, and the QT interval is often longer due to the T and the U waves, they tend to get fused together, and a long QT interval would occur. And occasionally in some books you may see it as a QU interval also. So that doesn't make much of a difference. So QT interval or QU interval, don't get confused about this. This is about simply a variation in the nomenclature. The U wave is when the T is having a biphasic feature and T wave produces a U-shaped curvature, that's called as a U wave, and at that stage it's often named as a QU interval. When it becomes more severe, the hypokalemia becomes more severe or the potassium level gets reduced further, it results in supraventricular and ectopic beats and supraventricular tachyarrhythmias. Faster rates would occur, and even atrial tachycardia or atrial flutter could occur. And later, in still stages, it produces a ventricular arrhythmia, and that ventricular arrhythmia occurring rapidly in case of for a short duration is called as a Torsades de Pointes. Now, some examples of the same hypokalemia, because hypokalemia is a clinically significant condition. I'll just have a bit more detail about that and more examples of that. In this case, you can see the PQ interval becoming, PR interval becoming longer, and the ST segment becoming depressed. So early stage of hypokalemia, mild hypokalemia. These kinds of situations can be seen in wards quite frequently. Many of the patients whom you see would have this kind of a feature. When hypokalemia becomes more severe, it results in, now this is a best example of the same. Initially, it will be having a normal rhythm. Then, when the hypokalemia becomes more severe, in the next degree, the rhythm alters. There is a tendency for having an irregular rhythm. See, in this case, the interval between these two cardiac cycles, RR interval at this and RR interval between these two, is different. So that's suggestive of a ventricular ectopic generation. There is a ventricular ectopic feature which we have already discussed as it. PR interval is gradually prolonged. As it becomes more severe, it produces more of ectopic ventricular beats, and a ventricular beats along with the atrial flutter, where there is a total P wave incoordination, and then the QRS complexes occur haphazardly. That stage is called as a Torsades de Pointes. Torsades de Pointes is simply a situation where there will be a rapid beats of ventricles, and there is a total dissociation between the atrium and the ventricles, which is a very critical, and most of the times that results in fatal complications as such. Now, to make it easy to remember about that, this I have taken a slide from some these resources, very interesting issue, are easy. If you have to differentiate between hypokalemia and hyperkalemia, the simple rule is push and pull rule. In hypokalemia, the T wave is pushed down, ST depression occurs, and in hyperkalemia, it's pulled up. So those who feel like quite difficult to remember all that, this is a very simple and easy method of describing it. Then the next, not so important, but occasionally occurring would be hypomagnesemia. In the hypomagnesemia, where the magnesium level gets reduced, the changes are mainly about the QT interval. That QT interval becomes longer and gradually longer. Otherwise, the shape features would be normal. The QT interval becomes longer and longer, as you see over here, and the feature, otherwise the features will be normal. Clinically, hypomagnesemia is not as frequent as the hypokalemia. Hypocalcemia is another of the condition which also occurs quite frequently, not as frequent as the hypokalemia. In this case, the T waves become widened. See, QT interval is prolonged, T wave become widened and flattened. A flattened T wave is the very characteristic. Say, a prolonged QT interval with a flattened and widened T wave, a very widened wave, T wave, but not the U wave, rather the earlier component of the T wave, that the initial repolarization wave, it becomes flattened, takes more long time. That's typical of hypocalcemia, the reduced calcium level. So calcium, magnesium, potassium level have to be assessed. Now, Torsades points is simply where you will have a severe ventricular arrhythmias, ventricular beats, which can occur as the cycles as such. So that's a very common term used for any of those conditions with the prolonged QT wave and then irregular arrhythmias, ventricular beats as such. Of course, very specific in case of hyperkalemia as such. So that's one of the conditions. Next, another clinically important condition where the QT interval will alter would be the digitalis toxicity. Digitalis is a very frequently used drug in cardiac pathologies, and in the digitalis toxicity or the digitalis patient who is digitalized, there is always a tendency for the PQ interval or also has to be prolonged, and the QRS interval also becomes prolonged. QT interval also becomes prolonged. So all these three intervals, they tend to get a prolonged as such. So in the initial stages of digitalis toxicity, when the digitalis toxicity is just initiated, in that condition, the rhythm may not be significantly altered. Of course, in this ECG, the rhythm is not perfectly normal, but what happens is the total time interval may be normal, but the features of the QRS complex would be different. See, in the first beat, the QRS complex is upright. Next cycle, the QRS complex has taken a different shape and it becomes more wider than the previous one, atypical QRS complexes. And this same is repeated. Now, this is also called as a bigeminy, where you will have the alternating sorts of this cardiac cycle. Occasionally, this can be even felt when you palpate the pulse. And then it's called as pulsus bigeminus. Pulsus bigeminus, where one beat of the pulse is stronger, the next beat is weaker, and again the same is repeated. On auscultation also, this can be made out by changing variable heart sounds. So, digitalis toxicity is identified clinically. Of course, you have the other clinical signs, important. The other important clinical sign in case of digitalis toxicity is a reduced appetite. A patient who has on digitalis and when he complains of anorexia and reduced appetite, think of the possibility of digital toxicity. That's the rule of thumb. Then, of course, if you have missed it, the next is about the pulsus bigeminus and auscultatory findings. So that's the initial stage of the digitalis toxicity. When the digital toxicity becomes still in the next level, when it becomes higher, or still you have missed that initial opportunity, then the pulse rate becomes significantly diminished and there is a complete AV block, atrioventricular block. I think AV block we have discussed, like where you will have a independent ventricular contractions, and the P waves, they occur at their own rate. See, you have that P waves occurring at their own rate. QRS complexes occurring at some pace as such, which is again having a irregular rhythm. The rhythm is not proper. In between, you will have many of these missed waves. The QRS complex doesn't occur, but some partial stimulation occurs. So this kind of irregular waves could occur, and these are the premature ventricular complexes. A premature ventricular complex, prolonged QRS interval, prolonged PR interval, and then a total dissociation of the atrium and the ventricles. And often it will be atrial tachycardia and the ventricular this bradycardia. When you palpate the pulse would be less than 60. Now, in any case of digitalization, from the clinical point of view, when the pulse rate is less than 60, you need to be very cautious. That's the rule. And the rule is, whenever a patient is on digitalis toxicity, you have to ensure that the pulse rate is always above 68. That's the general rule from the clinical point of view. Now, when the pulse rate is at a lower rate, that's suggestive of a more severe digitalis toxicity. Of course, early changes of the digitalis toxicity also can be seen as a shape, that ST segment shape, that ST segment shape being curved, and often the term used is Salvador-Dali mustach. It looks like the mustach of Salvador Dali. Salvador Dali is one of the epical hero as such. Or it also can result in a T-wave depression in digitalis toxicity. So digitalis toxicity also can present with occasionally a normal and regular rhythm, but a T-wave depression and a U-wave also could be formed. QRS interval could be prolonged. So in this ECG, there is not a very standard by the minute, but still the intensity of the QRS complexes are not the same. See, in the first lead or first beat, the intensity of the QRS complex is higher. In the next, the intensity of the cardiac QRS complex is slightly lesser. So this is how you can identify the digitalis toxicity at the earliest stage. Now, this is one of the possible earliest stage of digitalis toxicity. Anyway, digitalis toxicity is one of the conditions which are quite important, and from the clinical point of view, they need to be assessed carefully. And related to the QTC interval or QT interval, this is one of the important conditions. Now, other factors which produce the QT interval, we can just skip off that because they are not clinically important. Otherwise, our these classes will continue infinitely. So we'll stop at that level where the important factors are considered. The next part which we discuss would be the ST segment elevation and depression as such. Causes which produce or conditions which can produce the changes in the ST segment level, the uniformity, are either myocardial infarction, coronary vasospasm, or Prinzmetal's angina, where the difference between infarction and the angina is when there is a reversible ischemia, when the blood flow is reduced temporarily, or there is a temporary imbalance between the oxygen supplied and oxygen need, that produces the angina. When it results in necrosis, that's called as the infarction. It also can occur in pericarditis or a benign repolarization phases, like which are not clinically significant. Bundle branch blocks, ventricular hypertrophies, ventricular aneurysms, Brugada syndrome, ventricular paced rhythms, raised intracranial pressure, and Tucker's-Wood cardiomyopathy. Of course, we will discuss again only a significant, important conditions only. Among them, the most important is ischemia. So ischemia is the most important condition related to heart. From the practical clinical point of view, more than 80% of the patients whom you deal with in cardiac pathology, they related to the ischemic category. The other are the 20%. So we will have more time and more discussion about the ischemic changes and how to differentiate the ischemia from other conditions, and main focus would be from that point of view. Now, the one characteristic feature, whenever we say the ischemia in the cardiac pathology, it's about the ST segment elevation. Now, for the clinical conditions, for clinically or in the cardiac cardiology, we generally categorize the ischemia into two categories: ST segment elevated myocardial infarction, STEMI, or non-ST segment elevation myocardial infarction, or NSTEMI. NSTEMI and STEMI are the two categories. Now, NSTEMI is that condition where the ST segment elevation may not occur. Of course, earlier it was believed that these non-ST segment elevation conditions would have a better prognosis than ST segment elevation, but now it is known that that's not really true. But a non-ST segment elevation conditions usually suggest of a progressive ischemia, whereas ST segment elevation is established infarction. Now, we'll mainly focus on the ST segment elevation in the beginning, then we'll come to that NSTM or non-ST segment elevation at the end of this discussion. Now, ST segment elevation produced the ischemia. For the sake of your easy identification of the ST segment pattern, these are certain of those normal patterns which you see as such. Like ST segment could be either convex, or it could be straight and upsloping, and straight and horizontal, or straight and downsloping. These are the terms used for the different shapes. For the ST segment elevation produced with the ischemia. Again, some more of the example, it could be like very high. At times, the ST segment elevation could be very high, and ST segment elevation could be like the total. It may look like it has covered the total QRS complex. The QRS complex is almost masked by that. This kind of features could occur in case of the ischemia. In general, Now, this is a very general statement. Some exceptions are there. When the ST segment elevation occurs with a concavity, the general rule is it may not be due to the ischemia. Non-ischemic ST segment elevation. Ischemic segment ST segment elevation, as a rule, would have a non-curved portion. Either it's horizontal or maybe somewhat like a straight oblique line, straight line. When the elevation of the ST segment is curved, then it's generally a non-ischemic. But this rule also has an exception. This rule has an exception to a certain extent. So at that situation, you need to depend upon the clinical features. But on an average, when you read the ECG, if you have a ST segment elevation with a concavity at the ST segment, probably that patient is not of a ischemia. This is the usual rule which you can have the example. Of course, the fourth set of the images is from a real-time patient. Now, these are the schematic diagrams, the first part. These are from the real patient features where the schematic diagrams are seen in the ECG proper, in the different leads of these ischemic changes as such. More of the ST. Now, when I say the ST segment depression, the ST segment elevation, you have seen the examples. ST segment depression, again, it's also the similar situation, and the ST segment depression has to be assessed in comparison to the baseline. See, whenever we consider about the ST segment variation, either elevation or depression, it's always in comparison to the baseline, and to confirm whether it's really depressed or otherwise, and the different variations, you'll have to consider these factors. Either ST segment could be as an upsloping effect, or a downsloping depression, or a horizontal depression. These are the possible variations of presentation of the ST segment elevation and depression. Now, we apply this to the myocardial infarction to understand that you need to have some idea about the blood flow of the heart and how the ischemia and the infarction would occur. Though the heart would have multiple branches of the blood vessels, the major vessels are the left coronary, the left anterior descending coronary, and the right coronary. These are the three major main blood vessels. And hence, in gross, of course, now the classification of the infarction now is quite varying, and it's going on detail, but a standard, a universally accepted method of classifying the infarctions would be either it's a left posterior or left anterior or anterior infarction, and then right ventricular infarctions. In addition to that, the infarction also are classified depending upon the depth of the involved tissue. When it is involving the endocardial area, that's called a subendocardial infarction. When it involves the whole of the myocardium, then it's called as a transmural infarction. When it occurs only the epicardium or the muscle, the external layers of the muscles are involved, then it's called as an epicardial infarction. So infarctions are named with the different names as such. For gross, the infarctions are categorized as anterior, inferior, and lateral as such. To avoid all these complex issues, making the details lesser and to present it as a capsule, I think I have presented this table. In an anterior infarction, the main ECG changes for ECG reading, you will be mainly focused on the thoracic leads V1 to V4. When it's an inferior infarction, you will be mainly focused on lead 2, 3 AVF, which suggests of right coronary artery involvement. When it's a lateral infarction, lead 1, AVL, V5, V6, then and this is circumflex artery involved. This is the simplest possible explanation of these infarctions located. If you read the textbooks, you will have still many more complex issues, and there can be quite confusion going into higher detail, like each of these posterior descending artery and marginal artery, etc. I think that much is not really necessary from the clinical point of view. From the clinical point of view, a gross classification of the anterior, inferior, and lateral locales, these locations of the infarction would be more than sufficient as such. even those who do the interventional practice, cardiology interventions also, that kind of an assessment of these minor branches with the ECG now has become obsolete, because you have the facility of the angiography. With the angiography, you can make out any of these, identify the location exactly, and they handle them. So interventional ECGs, interventional cardiologists also, they do not go into the ECG details now in terms of going into the finer branches. So I think it's better to limit to these issues as such. Now, the next part is about why the ECG changes ECG changes are produced in the ischemia. When the blood flow is reduced to the tissues, muscle tissues, or rather the oxygen supply is not sufficient. When I say the ischemia, it's not necessary that the quantitatively the blood flow is reduced. It means the oxygen demand of the muscles are not met with. It could be due to both the reasons. The oxygen demand might have been increased, and though the supply otherwise is normal, or it could be like the oxygen supply is reduced either due to a reduced oxygen concentration in the blood, though the quantity of the blood flowing may be normal, or it could be the reduced blood flow itself. So the possibilities which can produce the ischemia could be any of these three. Any of these three in the sense, possible increase in the oxygen demand, possible reduction of the oxygen concentration in the blood, like a patient who has a choking, respiratory abnormality, and hence the oxygen concentration in the blood is not possible, though the quantity of blood flowing is normal. Or it could be a blood flow itself is reduced, like a thrombosis, coronary thrombosis. So it's not that every patient of a cardiac ischemia has a coronary event. A non-coronary event also can produce a cardiac ischemia. And this also is classified as obstructive or non-obstructive from the clinical point of view. Okay, that's the other part. Now coming to the issue of the ECG changes. Once the blood flow is reduced or the oxygen demand and supply is imbalanced, then the activity of repolarization becomes abnormal, and the repolarization takes more time. And as a result of that, during the phase of repolarization of the muscles, there will be a continuous electrical activity. Now, due to that continuous electrical activity, the ST segment tends to get changed. So that's one. And repolarization becomes more time, and hence the T wave becomes prominent. So peak T wave and the ST segment shifting from the baseline is the characteristic feature in case of the ischemia. But later on, now once the ischemia occurs, then the next stage will be cell death may occur. Now when the cell death occurs, a dead cell would be inactive. There will be no current produced as such. But surrounding cells, they are producing the current. So there can be a small current flown between the dead cell and the normal cells around the muscles. So there could be a focus of current flow which is not normal, and this focus of the current flow may be seen as some abnormal wave, which we also call as current of injury. Now we'll discuss more about that current of injury next as such. But the important is that when there is a dead cell, the dead cell would have no polarization, there will be no polarity, it will be inactive, it will be a bad conductor, and the surrounding area of the normal cells, they will be having the electrical activity, and hence there will be a minor current flow between this dead cell and the normal cell, and this dead cell and current flow between the dead cell and the normal cell will be seen as a abnormal wave or current of injury. Current of injury is one part which we will discuss it later about the shapes. Now for the present, it's seen as an acute wave at the end of either the S wave or maybe at the beginning of the Q wave. Then later, when the infarction has been established, and later suppose the patient has recovered, during that stage, there will be a gradual fibrosis, that dead tissue would be replaced by the fibrous tissue. Fibrous tissues are living tissues, and hence they would have a membrane potential, but they cannot be activated. They cannot have an action potential. So you will have a focus where there will be a membrane potential, and then in the surrounding area, there will be action potentials going on. And there again, there will be an abnormal current flow, but this current flow is not as in between a dead cell and a living cell. Dead cell would have a zero potential or no membrane potential, and current flow would be during both the repolarization as well as the depolarization, there will be a current flow. But with the fibrous tissue, because the fibrous tissues are the living cell, there will be a membrane potential. And hence, in the repolarized stage, there will be no current flow. But during the depolarization, there will be a current flow between these two. And hence, what you see is the T waves, they may become normal. It only remains as the ST segment changes. There will be a ST segment change formed. These currents of injury may go as such. In terms of the gross changes which you see in the tissue, immediately after the infarction, if you look at the infarction in patients with the onset of the cardiac symptoms, in the microscopically, there may not be any gross changes in the tissue, but it's only the functional. The conduction of the impulses would be abnormal, and hence at that stage, you will have only the T wave prominent. Then usually, now this hours, 24 to 48 hours, 3 to 7 days, these are all the average times taken for the changes which occur. The muscles become pale and edematous, and during that stage, the current of injury would be seen. So maximum current of injury is usually seen in the period between 24 to 48 hours. Then gradually that edema becomes reduced, and as the edema becomes reduced, the changes will also become diminished, and by about 3 to 6 weeks, there will be a fibrosis, and hence the changes would occur. This is a usual time period in case of an infarction. So first 48 hours, the current of injury is expected. Gradually, as the patient is recovering, that current of injury will be gradually masked, and then at the end, you will have a situation where it will be flattened. Now, what you mean by this, the ECG changes, again, the same, whatever we have discussed, this diagram gives you a somewhat a better description of the same. It will be mainly the prominent T waves in the beginning of ischemia. As the infarction occurs, the ST segment becomes altered, ST segment becomes elevated. T waves, of course, they tend to get depressed. You will have a current of injury seen as a extra wave over here. During the next hours, as it recovers, like as the fibrosis occurs, ST segment tends to shift towards the baseline, T wave tends to become altered. Changes in the T wave are the characteristic feature. So whenever we discuss about the ischemic changes in the heart, in the ECG, it all depends upon the time period of onset of the ischemia as such. Now, the same, whatever we have discussed till now was in the schematic diagrams. Now I am just showing you some of those images of the real-time patients. In a case of ischemia, where the patient has an angina during the episode of pain, the T waves are prominent. ST segment is slightly elevated, not curved as such. That's the typical feature of initial ischemia. Now, another important issue, patient, like a patient who had some discomfort but not any typical clinical symptoms of ischemia. When the ECG is recorded, clinically normal, and the T waves are hyperactive. Then after 2 hours, the patient develops the pain in the epigastric area, not the real chest area. And then again, if you record the ECG shows the changes in the T waves. T waves, they tend to become inverted, and the changes in the T wave, again, they become actually more prominent, more pointed, but they become changed in their pattern. This is the typical changes which you see in case of the onset of the ischemia. That's when the cells are not dead. In this condition, cells are not dead, but the cells are behaving abnormally due to a reduced oxygen exchange as such. That's that one. Now, in such conditions, usually to identify this ischemia, a stress ECG is suggested. Many of the patients may have a normal ECG recording, apparently normal ECG recording, when they are in the resting condition. Once you ask the patient to do the exercise, that oxygen imbalance may be produced. it results in that prominent T waves and temporary ST segment depression. So this is a typical presentation of a patient who has a latent ischemia. We use the term latent ischemia. Resting condition, normal ECG. When the patient does the exercise, peak exercise, it shows that ST segment tends to shift and the T waves become more prominent, T waves become spiked as such. Then after the recovery, during the recovery, again it comes back, tends to come back to the normal. This kind of changes are the ischemic changes which are seen in case of a latent ischemia. Now, when we speak of this wave pattern, there is another area of confusion. The confusion is if a patient is in a ICU and you have a monitor, in the monitor, the recorded ECG is through the oscilloscope, which have no inertia. Whereas the paper recording ECG, you will be recording the ECG with a needle which has its weight and has inertia. So the shapes of these waves may slightly differ. The waves will look sharper when you look at the monitor. At the same time, when you record on the paper, the shapes may become a bit wider. The waves may look wider, shapes may be slightly altered, particularly the notches and the peaks of the waves may become less prominent in a paper, whereas in the monitor, they may look sharper. That should not produce any confusion from the practical clinical point of view. That's about certain of the basic issues about the ischemia and ischemic changes. We will continue with the ischemia and ischemic changes in the next session, more detail about that. If there are any questions, I will try to answer those questions and then we'll conclude. I think there are no questions. It's time now. So we'll conclude. Right, okay.
Thank you, sir.
There is a rise in CKMB. That CKMB is a different issue. We'll come to that later. The cardiac enzymes and their role, I'll come to that later in the next sessions. Right, okay. Right.